So our next presenter is Mr. David Driskill, who holds a post-professional degree from the Catholic University, Washington, D.C. in urban design and a professional degree in architecture from here at Texas Tech University. He is the director of urban tech and the downtown studio for the College of Architecture. We have a satellite in downtown Lubbock. And Urban Tech is in its third year and is engaged in the City of Lubbock Central Business District Tax Increment Finance Board and the Homeless Consortium in envisioning a transformed and viable downtown Lubbock. Urban Tech is a participant in the First Friday Art Trail, which brings 4,000 people to the city center each month and celebrates our artists. Professor Driskill practiced architecture, urban design in Washington, D.C. and Houston, Texas for 15 years prior to 1987. And then we were fortunate to have him come here to the college. And we appreciate all his contributions. David?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And Alexandra, I had no idea what you've been doing. I don't actually have to give my presentation anymore because my student not only, I'm still stuck on the launching pad. He went way beyond, and which is exactly what every professor wants. So thank you, Alexander. This is going to be a really broad brush synopsis of a very long journey. So this journey, I've often said that I'm an urbanist because I spent my first 12 years in Happy, Texas, the town without a frown, which was indeed, could be misconstrued as Pleasantville. And I was that kid in front of the TV watching the Sullivan debate with Eisenhower. And it was that place where you could walk, you didn't have to have money. My dad had a Texaco service station. And on one side of me was Dr. Robinson, and on the other side was Vernon Harmon, probably the county's wealthiest citizen. And across the street is a rent house, a little tiny rent house, a grandmother and granddad that weren't mine, but they counted. And then the town's probably worst house, most poverty-stricken family. And we were all literally across the street from each other in the same confine. And you cross the fence, you go out into the pasture in your wild. So I felt like my first 12 years were totally free, a wildflower. And that's sort of just the beginning of the journey. Another piece was a philosophy lecture here after I started teaching on deep ecology. And I think you'll find this lecture to be deep context, as it may relate to deep ecology. And as we're looking at downtown, this is J Street, and this is a piece entitled From Pavement to Prairie. That's only a piece of a piece. There was a whole installation by Upe and Carol Flukiger, which is the notion of from pavement to prairie. Because you see our downtown is that constructed context of indeed bricks. So I'm going to take this place, and I've been accused of being xenophobic, and there's a certain amount of truth to that because I'm embedded in this place. Although I find myself, while I am of this place, odd because I don't represent the majority of the attitudes of the place. So I'm this sort of anomaly that's in love with the place, but like something of an agitator. So we're going to go through this place in time. And if you look at Lubbock, Texas, it's actually the oldest place of proven human habitation in North America. We think of it as new. Nothing was here, before 1890. Well, indeed, people have lived here for 15 to 12,000 years. And I'm doing this whole span of time with 2 slides. You can go to the Lubbock Landmark and learn all about it. But it's the receding ice cap, So at this time, 15 years ago, the ice cap is actually north of here, but it creates a swath of land that puts Lubbock at the north end of what's not ice. And at that time, the Llano Estacado is water bubbling out of the ground, literally, and a place for civilization to begin. And of course, that's Avenue J and the canyons as it goes through there. That point in the 90s when we settle, and as we project forward, there is Bruno's house. Okay. So here we are, and from that 15,000 years up to about pre-18th century, the environment changed drastically, I'm sure, because there were 7-degree temperature change in terms of melting that ice cap. So while the environment was changing, the attitude or the relationship that humans had with nature was one of just in it. Maybe you're like, humans are not drastically changing nature, they're surviving it, they're working with it. What was the presentation about 15,000 years ago is tools they're showing us. So that's about, the time that people were arriving in Lubbock. Look at this. The 19th century is the Texas frontier period. And what's happening in Texas is that with the Mexican-American War and much of the development of Texas, this is an area that's pretty well left out of that. Mexico's interested in trade trails through New Mexico, along the Gulf border. There's really, we've transferred a soft change in our relationship with nature, very sort of with the indigenous population, the Indians, and actually Catholics, the conquistadors came in, that sort of that Europeanization of the prairie the Catholic Latino transition is a soft one, if you wouldn't call it that. They're not engaged in battling nature, but still connecting. It is at this time that the Blue Nun comes over from Santa Fe to Christianized indigenous people. It is this time where the bishop from Santa Fe, this is actually before this. This is like, better go back a slide. I'm talking about the slide. It is at this time that the bishop goes to Europe to ask for a cathedral in Lubbock. The bishop never comes back. The cathedral's never built. And the indigenous, the Apaches, are moved back into the mountains of New Mexico because of the Comanches. The Comanches, who are not the people of this land, but is their last stand. This is now Quanah Parker, and they're all coming into this area because this is their last spot. And those wars were bitter with Quanah Parker. But this is where those wars ended. And we have this place of the last frontier and the cattle and the range and free range period. Well, this transition was 100 years. Okay, we're talking about a sort of relationship of nature for 15,000 years. In 100 years, we have this sort of soft transition to what we see now, which is recent, very recent. And this is that same place. And so this is that industrialization of the prairie. And with this came some really unexpected consequences. You really get into this Dust Bowl, with gotten a lot of attention with movies and things lately, where right before the 30s, the prairie was plowed almost entirely. Then with the drop of cotton prices, the people who owned the land, who actually were New York City, the East Coast, just abandoned the land as it was all plowed. The farmers and people who maybe didn't own the land but worked the land, trotting off and doing what they're going to do. I know my father's story was that, you know, they lived in a little small shack and ate black-eyed peas, and dirt came through the screen door, and then the Depression set in. So, so here we sort of see. So, you know, here we see this. Well, but through this industrialization of the prairie came great wealth. Okay, it is sort of, once we got into, okay, Spindletop, this big moment in Texas history, oil. They gave us the gas motor. That the cattle were using windmills, shallow water, could feed cattle. They had the playa lakes. Once we got into oil, and we could afford pumps, tap into the aquifer to irrigate that cotton, we've got great wealth. We have tractors that can plow that land. So it's really that industrial farm, and it is really after the war where we build great wealth. And these magnificent facilities, these churches were built on Broadway, were all built right there in that early 50s. And 1960, you see Texas Tech was 9,000 students. Here we are with, you know, our football palace, 32,000 students, School of Law, School of Medicine. Life has been good on the High Plains. But what is that attitude towards nature that created this wealth? And it's one of it comes out of this. This is a professor from Austin Community College that has put together this whole paper on the Anglo-European Protestantism and how it took a certain attitude, that sort of Scotch-Irish attitude that came in, that was able to really embattle nature and take it on to transform this place. And so evidence of this sort of belief system of the people give us these sort of identifiers so that we're, you know, second at one point, I guess we still are, we may be first by now, the most conservative city in the nation, right? Our cost of living is low, and by Money Magazine, we're number 12 among, you know, great places to start a business. I mean, life is good in Lubbock, and it has to do with the attitudes of the people that are here and settled this place. Well, one of these characteristics is individualism. So out of that individualism, out of this period came these sort of voices, you know, and this is a quote from Natalie Maines. Reflects their desire to escape that environment. And wow. At what price, I have to ask, what are the unanticipated consequences of what we have done in terms of our attitude to embattle nature? So with our embattled nature, yes, we have the hubbub. Yes, we have great wealth. Look at our aquifer. Red is where it's being depleted. We have that fragmented city, which I think is best evidenced in zoning, which is segregation hardscape zones, which is much, again, connected to our previous lectures. And then here are these other identifiers. They're not quite as positive. What? Parent Magazine lists us 149th out of 150 as a smart place to settle down with. It says we're failing families. Well, you can go look that up. It has to do with a lack of public space. A lack of public space that directly connects to individualism. We all have our own backyard, and there is this sort of fundamental attitude that comes with that very fundamental group of people that settled this country. I mean, this area, part of the country. It isn't the Latino, Catholic, value system. It is an Anglo-European Protestant value system, and they're not the same. So we're number 6 on Forbes' list of dangerous cities. Where'd that come from? Well, would that have to do with zoning? Would that have to do that we have huge pieces of our city that are empty at one time, part of the time, or another? Well, we're number 3 on the most artery clogged cities in the nation. So these are all characteristics that sort of contrast with those others. We have created exactly what we wanted, but we've gotten these sort of unanticipated consequences. Well, if you know me at all, I'm not a negative person. And I see a very positive future. And I'm invested in this place. And I'm committed to seeing it. And right now, when you go to the Department in Agriculture here at Texas Tech, you will see the research that's transforming this monoculture of cotton into a multiculture of crops and rotated crops. Something that will not, if the land is planted, you don't have the dirt. Can you imagine? Do you know that we think of dirt storms as just like normal? They haven't been normal. They were just recent. Those are a recent phenomena that we created. And we look at, windmills sprouting up into the cotton fields. And we look at, well, what is this? This is Cogna Nascazzi, not a new film, beautiful film, no words. And this is from Cogna Nascazzi, which is sort of hitting what I think is the issue on the head. We have encased ourselves in an artificial environment that has remarkably placed the original, nature itself. We do not live with nature any longer. We live above it, off of it, as it were. Nature has become the resource to keep this artificial and new nature alive. Now, I know Alexander just made the point that there is like just one nature, and we're in it. And Dr. Amy Freeman Lee, who was a public member of the Texas Society of Architects, says the same thing. Because I was there at a board meeting when she was our public member making a report for the Built Environment Committee. And I was chastised by Dr. Amy Freeman Lee. And she said, we have but one environment. So, the title of the paper. It's the only big word I know. A toxinous. I learned to say it by listening to it on the computer several times. I probably still do it wrong, but it's my pronunciation. I'm sticking with it. And it means present from the earliest time, descended from the original flora, fauna, or inhabitants of the region in which it is found. And it isn't, and with this idea, I'm not saying throw back, that we go back, because how do you establish within that period of time an appropriate environment? But it is a connected environment, and I think we have to be a part of our place. And so here's Avenue J, and here's sort of the beginning of our canyons. And we are right at the edge. So it's what I call urbanism, prairie palisade. We're the prairie at the edge. And so this image, if you go back, the first one I showed where Upe Fluker and Carol are doing this, from pavement to prairie. I've overlaid the canyons to J Street. And I find the canyons much more, in the same way that the canyons are erosion of the prairie, I think J Street in our downtown is much more related to an erosion of the prairie. So I see that kind of connection is one that is, I find, something to connect to. So anyway, so far that's kind of a summary. Okay, the prairie and canyons have supported human life for 12,000 years. We are a city of individualism and wealth. We have embattled nature and fragmented culture. And I think we've got to find a toxinous design. Now, what does that mean? Well, First of all, I think we do have to recognize our downtown as a drawscape. The challenge for designers is to integrate in the inevitable dross into more flexible aesthetic and design strategies. The landscape of the contemporary horizontal city is no longer a place making or a condensing medium. Instead, it is fragmented and chaotic spread, escaping the wholeness, objectivity, and public consciousness. So, when we look at Avenue J, one of the things we've looked at is reconnecting the ethnic neighborhoods in Yellow House Canyon to downtown. So it comes down to actually a bridge, but it's a bridge that gets us under the railroad, under the freeway, and over the feeder, under the railroad, under the freeway, into Guadalupe and into the canyon. And with Texas Tech, down Guadalupe here, we get a connection all the way to Texas Tech. So part of that is connection. And how, you know, that connecting of downtown, of Arts District, Central Business District, Entertainment District, down connecting the enclaves with mixed use, which gives, that's that security issue, not that fragmented, but again, mixing the use, pulling things back together, and activating Avenue J, again, with a park system. So there's a continuity of activities that relate to movement in that natural environment, a very direct and real connection. And again, downtown was zoned commercial. Just recently, they rezoned it into mixed use. But up until very recently, it was commercial. It was illegal to live there. So it is efficiency, it is health through walking and bicycling, and safety through occupied space. It's color. This came from Shannon and Will Cannon as their piece of the Lubbock Arts Festival, and the artist's recognition of context was one of light, and that Lubbock is a full spectrum of light, and whatever we do with our environment should pick up and use that light, and that light is color. And this piece, which is Christy Maddox, as a graduate student, worked with me on this. It's when I said, here's that canyon. Well, so, you know, that canyon has, by definition, a river at the bottom, which is for the most part dry, except when it rains, it becomes the funnel. And then, of course, it's got plants and things that slow that down and help it absorb it. Well, if you look at our street is that dry riverbed. It does funnel our water, and it needs to, like that dry riverbed, percolate. And we need the landscaping and the interruptions and the collections along it to slow it down and let it percolate. So what we looked at in terms of brick streets is we had, you know, Lubbock recently tore all the brick out on Main Street. And it was, you know, Delbert McDougall, our developer, told the city council that, well, brick is nice, it just costs too much, it's just too expensive. So I didn't know if that was true, so we set out to answer that question. And our brick roads are 80 years old, so we use 70 as a lifespan. And the cost of brick, asphalt, and concrete over 70 years is basically the same. So in the long term, it's not really about cost. If you look at the greenhouse the carbon footprint, it's actually concrete is worse than asphalt because of the cement. And brick, of which we already own, is like nothing. And then if you actually design the brick in a way that it percolates, it can actually become a storm drainage system. You put the perforated pipes in underneath the brick and let it percolate. Now it is a road and a storm drainage system, and now it costs less than what we do. So this was sort of a piece that I think kind of takes us in a way that I'm looking. Now, this is when I say that all this sort of journey has got taken me to a starting point. What I see here, and then this looks like nature's taken over, there are no humans in this space, is really simplistic. But somehow, as we see this dry riverbed, and we look at our indigenous planning and our xeriscaping what this says is that we have to promote that green and that life and biodiversity in every opportunity we get, whether we're planting roofs, whether we're putting things on balconies, where we're creating West Texas green walls. Somehow or other, we even have to integrate. We're charged with supporting and being a part of an environment. We need to be ecologists. Well, you know, I think maybe we have to collaborate. So anyway, this is with the last part of Avenue J, following the principles of landscape urbanism, the Congress of New Urbanism, sustainable design, and historic preservation guidelines, Avenue J is seen as a destination and as a livable, healthy neighborhood. So this is just so much the beginning. We were inspired by Jane, Spring into Green, and Brad Lancaster was here, and Jackie Booker, and our colleagues, Christian Pongratz and Maria, who's worked with us from the beginning, graduate assistants who've invested a great deal of time in this, and our Urban Tech Studios. So, in summation, it's just, to me, a beginning. It's just an idea. But somehow or other, we know that our prairie and canyons will support human life for another 12,000 years. We know that Lubbock, Texas is a community of citizens embracing nature and diverse cultures in autonomous design. And actually, I don't think Southwest Lubbock is going to embrace this at all. But Lubbock is a growing city, and we're making connections to a Latino Catholic culture. We have the university, of which people are coming in, they're very diverse populations. So I don't think it's changing an existing value system, but I do think it is promoting opportunities for another. Thank you.